Okay, and we're off. Good morning, noon, evening, or night, depending when you're watching this video. My name is Legend, and welcome back to World of Tanks and the Magnificent Maneuvers series, where today we are going to watch several maneuvers replays, this time focusing on some interesting base-orientated battles. Battles either within or directly around the cap circle. And we are starting off on Pearl River, where I take the initiative as the, fastest heavy tank in order to go aggressively towards the outer corner in order to counter the enemy mediums right there. Because by doing that, I prevent those mediums from having fire at my approaching teammates, who can advance without taking much shots of damage that way. However, the enemies have different plans, and noticing that 3 enemies are in the cap with no quick response to take countermeasures, I decide to rush straight through the enemy flank in order to make it towards the cap before it will be capped out. All the while getting fired at by the enemies at the flank and arriving at the very last second just to pass the cap on time for me and my team to reset the enemy cap progression. Meanwhile, Maveuvers going for the ram on the 780, but not going for our focus fire target. Small point for improvement for him, but we got the BZ-75 nevertheless. After that, the focus fire is on point again, however my shot bouncing again, deviating at the last moment towards the side of the 705, but I got them in the end. Then the fun is over for me as the E100 arrives, but luckily we outnumber the enemies in this encounter. However, my team seems to have trouble penetrating the E100. Unlucky to have this occurring underneath this rock formation, so I cannot really see where those shots at the E100 are aimed at. But Ruby07 makes a good choice to push through, making the E100 turn its turret so much that MPNL and PNL is able to finish it off. Thus get surprised and killed by the combined force of the Object 140 and STRV. However, aardappel soepkommetje, that translates from Dutch to potato soup bowl, yeah, you just don't ask, does kill the Object 140 and with MPNL makes another right decision to cap out instead of pushing the full health STRV. However, the STRV is no one's fool and takes the fight towards them. But even with the highest DPM among vehicles still alive, he still cannot out DPM those 2 tanks at once, which results into a victory. So a great example of cap pressure awareness. I've done this several times before, where I became so aware that the cap pressure is very urgent that I just YOLO straight into it, but sometimes it is already too late. Luckily, this time my intuitions kicked in just in time to make it into the cap at the very last second. The following step is to reset the base capture as much as possible, unless you have multiple vehicles inside the cap circle that aren't going to be killed off soon. So with that, the focus fire was pretty decent in there very quickly on, getting rid of the enemy tanks in rapid succession, which allowed us to get the upper hand at the very end, with the STRV definitely staying back far too long. So for the next replay, we are in Ghost Town and we decide to go straight into the cap circle and bunkering ourselves in at the corner right here. Even though the enemy has 2 angles on us and do get more shots of damage into us, in order to prevent the full cap, they eventually have to push in. And as this happened, the Super Conqueror takes the initiative, so he is going to be the first target of our focus fire as he drives all the way across our group. However, with multiple of our tanks being in the way of each other right now, very smart move of the Super Conqueror, we still eventually get him in the end, but we understand that we now have to scatter around more in order to be able to always fire at the focus fire target. Next one, the Object 277, which we also kill off very reliably, and with some confusion on the next target, we eventually pick the I7 lowest hit points and go forward from that one towards the Object 277. Now we are definitely spread out well enough to always have shot on those tanks, and we can use the wrecks of the already killed off vehicles as some additional cover. That way making it harder for the enemies to hit us back, unless they themselves will move around as well. But that only makes them slightly more vulnerable to our concentrated fire as we finish off the Object 260 and after getting rid of the I7 with a fire. And as my final act, I angle myself so that I block the I7 in such a way that he is facing his rear towards my teammates, who then both either miss or bounces their shots. But it's 2 against 1, so they finish him off in no time, especially with that fire right there. Especially with the fire right there. Especially with that fire right there. Guys, just fucking kill. Yeah, okay, good. God, finally. So as you saw, it can get pretty chaotic when both teams are brawling out in such a tight spot. However, what we excellently executed here is after the initial enemy push in, we decided to spread out in order to have more opportunities to hit our focus fire targets. If we stayed cluttered together, you saw it a bit at the start of the push in, some of the enemy tanks will get blocked off by friendly vehicles. By spreading out, you don't have to move that much around in order to get vision on the next target. And with that focus fire being more concentrated and creating more opportunities, consequently moving around also limits the focus firing of the enemy, who with their push in are trying to switch around while we were moving around, creating more wrecks in the process, which would give us better cover, where they are more seemingly stuck at a more passive location, not moving around that much, or moving around way less than us. But you can also notice it in the hit point bars of each teams. Well, our hit points were pretty much shared across all of our tanks, losing some hit points before even one of us gets killed off, while we are already tumbling down one of them, while 2 of the remaining enemies were still full hit points, focusing the ones with the smaller bars first, while they were more equalizing their firepower since they got less opportunities to target their actual focus fire target. So with those quick battles, we have another replay for you on Sand River, and I am acting more as a selfish bastard in the beginning as I take a wider flank around the gap instead of grouping up with my team. However, such a flanking maneuver does give more side shot opportunities, but in these situations you have to know if you are as effective from this flanking distance instead of a close quarter brawl with your team, which we saw in the previous replay can actually pan out rather successfully. Because after a reload here, it does take a slight amount of time to find a target between the buildings to shoot at and damage. So I quickly immersed myself into the group as well. And I joined with a lot of great focus fire that has been implemented by my team, seeing 3 of the enemies still at full health, that really indicates good focus fire. So of course I focus the next clear target that has noticeable less than full HP. Also showing that good focus fire makes it better visible for everyone on who would be the next target. Of course, not all shots are on the focus target because not everybody has visibility in this specific situation. But then again, instead of being left with 2 full hit point tanks, which brings the dilemma on which one to pick, it means that we got another clear target right off the bat, the one that has been fired at once. And this can matter for quick close quarters brawls where picking the target can be a chore to do in a chaotic environment. But this battle wasn't really a close one where it would be a 50-50 to win or lose, since, well, one of the enemies are AFK, or is he? Oh, that poor bastard. So even though this game was quite one-sided, mainly because it was in 7v6 from the start, it does give the most perfect example of focus fire that I've ever seen in an NBTT skirmish. So keep that in mind, guys. This is our new standard. I wonder how much I will be referring my clan members towards this video. Either a lot or none at all. But that scratches a topic for another time. For now, these battles show you some great close quarters brawls in and around the cap circle, giving some perfect insights on when to recognize when you definitely have to reset the cap, no matter what. Just go inside, just push right through. If you take damage, who cares? Try to reset, otherwise the game is immediately over. If you die, you at least tried. And also a lot with focus fire, and when it really gets cluttered, spread out in order to adjust better visibility on your focus fire target. And of course, with the focus fire, clear example is when you get several tanks with full HP, one tank that is dwindling down rather fast. But do keep in mind that if the focus fire target is for some reason not visible, you can use your shot on another target that is. It's not the end of the world at all. But when you can, you of course focus the focus fire target. So with that, that's the end of this video. Hope you learned from it. I certainly did. And with that, I will see you next time. Laters.